Create a YouTube video using this script. Here's a glimpse of what's ahead in our exploration of Noam Chomsky's rogue states. We'll be diving into 9 sections, each unraveling a crucial aspect of global power dynamics. First, we'll redefine what it means to be a rogue state. Then we'll examine the hypocrisy of power. We'll explore how media manufactures consent and the illusion of democracy. We'll weigh intervention against sovereignty and discuss the price of empire. Next, we'll consider Chomsky's enduring relevance and end with a call to action and hope for a just world. This insightful journey is penned by the renowned John Pilger, author of The New Rulers of the World. Section 1. Redefining rogue states. The term rogue state is a curious one. It evokes images of unpredictable actors, of nations operating outside the bounds of accepted international conduct. We are conditioned to think of countries like North Korea or Iran. But what if the very definition of a rogue state is flawed, a carefully constructed narrative designed to obscure the true perpetrators of global injustice? Noam Chomsky, in his seminal work Rogue States, challenges us to reconsider this very notion. He argues that the label is often arbitrarily applied, a tool used by powerful nations, particularly the United States, to demonize those who dare to challenge their hegemony. Chomsky's analysis is rooted in a simple yet profound observation, that power, left unchecked, inevitably corrupts. The United States, despite its pronouncements of freedom and democracy, has consistently acted in its own interests, often in direct violation of international law and norms. From the bombing of Cambodia to the invasion of Iraq, the historical record is replete with examples of the U.S. acting as a rogue state, destabilizing regions and leaving chaos in its wake. This is not to say that all states are equal in their transgressions, but Chomsky forces us to confront a difficult truth, that the self-proclaimed guardians of the international order are often its most egregious violators. This hypocrisy lies at the heart of his critique and serves as a starting point for understanding the dynamics of global power. The conventional narrative, peddled by governments and amplified by a compliant media, paints a simplistic picture. The West, led by the U.S., represents the forces of good, upholding democracy and freedom against the forces of tyranny and oppression. Chomsky dismantles this narrative, exposing the double standards and hidden agendas that underpin much of U.S. foreign policy. Section 2. The hypocrisy of power. Central to Chomsky's argument is the selective application of international law. The U.S., while quick to condemn others for transgressions, has consistently acted as if it is above the law. It has violated international treaties, ignored UN resolutions, and launched military interventions on flimsy pretexts, all the while presenting itself as a champion of the rules-based international order. This double standard is perhaps most evident in the U.S.'s approach to the use of force. While other nations are held to account for even minor infractions, the U.S. has repeatedly engaged in military action, often with devastating consequences, without facing any meaningful repercussions. Chomsky argues that this hypocrisy is not simply a matter of inconsistency, it is a deliberate strategy designed to maintain U.S. dominance. By setting itself up as the arbiter of international legitimacy, the U.S. grants itself the power to dictate the terms of global engagement, punishing those who step out of line and rewarding those who toe the line. This selective application of international law has far-reaching consequences. It undermines the very notion of a rules-based order, creating a system where might makes right. This, in turn, emboldens other powerful actors to act with impunity, further eroding the already fragile fabric of international law. Section 3. Manufactured consent media's role. Chomsky's critique extends beyond the actions of states to encompass the role of media in shaping public perception. He argues that the media, far from acting as a watchdog, often serves as a mouthpiece for state power, uncritically amplifying official narratives and marginalizing dissenting voices. This is achieved through a process of manufacturing consent, whereby the media, either consciously or unconsciously, frames issues in a way that supports the prevailing power structure. This can take many forms, from the selective use of language to the omission of crucial information. For example, Chomsky points to the media's coverage of U.S. military interventions. These interventions are often portrayed as humanitarian missions, necessary to liberate oppressed peoples or combat terrorism. The human cost of these interventions, the civilian casualties, the displacement, the long-term instability, is often downplayed or ignored altogether. This sanitized version of events serves to legitimize U.S. actions, both domestically and internationally. It creates the illusion of public support, making it politically palatable for governments to pursue aggressive foreign policies. Section 4. The Illusion of Democracy. Chomsky's critique of U.S. foreign policy is inextricably linked to his critique of U.S. democracy. He argues that the concentration of power in the hands of a wealthy elite has eroded democratic accountability, allowing a small group to dictate policy in their own interests, often at the expense of the majority. This is evident in the undue influence of corporations and lobby groups on the political process. From the military-industrial complex to the fossil fuel industry, powerful interests exert a disproportionate influence on policymaking, shaping legislation, and ensuring that their interests are prioritized. The result is a system of inverted totalitarianism, where the outward forms of democracy remain intact, but where real power resides elsewhere. In such a system, the public becomes little more than a passive audience, their consent manufactured through a combination of propaganda and fear. Section 5. Intervention versus sovereignty. One of the most contentious aspects of U.S. foreign policy is its record of intervention in the affairs of other nations. From covert operations to full-scale invasions, the U.S. has repeatedly interfered in the internal affairs of other countries, often with disastrous consequences. Chomsky argues that these interventions are rarely, if ever, motivated by humanitarian concerns. Instead, they are driven by a desire to maintain U.S. hegemony, to prevent the emergence of any rivals or challenges to U.S. dominance. This is often justified under the guise of promoting democracy or combating terrorism. However, Chomsky points out that the U.S. has a long history of supporting dictators and authoritarian regimes when it suits its interests. The principle of national sovereignty, enshrined in the UN Charter, is routinely violated by the U.S. in pursuit of its geopolitical objectives. This undermines the very foundation of international law and creates a climate of instability and mistrust. Section 6. The Price of Empire. The pursuit of empire comes at a heavy price, both for the imperial power and for those who find themselves on the receiving end of its ambitions. Chomsky argues that the United States' pursuit of global dominance has led to endless wars, economic exploitation, and environmental devastation. The human cost of U.S. foreign policy is immeasurable. Millions have been killed in wars and conflicts fueled by U.S. intervention. Countless others have been displaced, their lives shattered by violence and instability. The economic costs are equally staggering. The United States spends more on its military than any other country in the world, diverting resources from essential social programs and contributing to a growing national debt. Moreover, the United States' pursuit of empire has had a devastating impact on the environment. From the carbon emissions of its vast military machine to the toxic legacy of its wars, the United States is a major contributor to the climate crisis and other environmental problems. Section 7. Chomsky's enduring relevance. Chomsky's critique of U.S. foreign policy, though written over 2 decades ago, remains as relevant as ever. The issues he raises, the hypocrisy of power, the role of media, the illusion of democracy, are just as pressing today as they were then. If anything, the events of the past 2 decades, the war on terror, the rise of China, the increasing concentration of wealth and power, have only served to reinforce the urgency of Chomsky's message. In a world facing multiple crises, climate change, economic inequality, the erosion of democracy, it is more important than ever to challenge the dominant narratives and to demand a more just and equitable world order. Section 8. A call to action. Rogue States is not simply a work of critique, it is a call to action. Chomsky urges us to challenge the status quo, to hold our leaders accountable, and to demand a foreign policy based on principles of justice and respect for international law. This requires us to become informed citizens, to educate ourselves about the realities of U.S. foreign policy, and to challenge the propaganda that is constantly being fed to us by governments and the media. We must also support organizations and individuals working to promote peace, justice, and human rights. By joining together and raising our voices, we can create a more just and peaceful world. Section 9. The Hope for a Just World. Despite the bleak picture painted by Chomsky, Rogue States is not a pessimistic book. It is ultimately a work of hope, a belief that a better world is possible. Chomsky reminds us that throughout history, ordinary people have come together to challenge injustice and create a more equitable world. From the abolition of slavery to the struggle for civil rights, progress has always been driven by those who dared to challenge the status quo. In the face of overwhelming power, it is easy to feel powerless, but as Chomsky reminds us, we are not powerless. We have the power to change things. By speaking out, by organizing, by demanding better of our leaders, we can create a world where the rule of law prevails, where human rights are respected, and where all people have the opportunity to live in peace and dignity.